Only metres away from where children played, their parents were involved in a more serious game, trying to stop council workers from pushing on with a controversial new road on Wangi Point. Last night, Lake Macquarie City Council gave the go-ahead for the road after work was halted last week by a protesters' blockade. The protesters have returned to the point, saying the road will ruin a nature reserve.
We're going to lose part of our koala habitat, but it's also going to open up a corridor into one of the few remaining rainforest gullies we have left.
The road's opponents say council has rubber-stamped the project without first listening to the views of the community. But Max Poole, the manager of the Wangi Tourist Park, says the council has adhered to the democratic process in approving a road that is sorely needed.
It will provide greater safety for the residents that use the park and also the tourists that come here, and the local people that use the foreshore.
Mayor Ivan Welsh says despite the protest, the road will soon be a reality.
The council's made that decision, yes, the road goes on.
But the protesters are pegging down for a long fight.
The scene is set in Newcastle's East End in 1942. The story revolves around a family. The three sons work for the fictitious firm of Southern Steel.
Two of those sons represent the right and the left of political life in Newcastle in 1942. Rudd, the middle son, is a union organiser at the works, and Keir is a metallurgist and he's a boss at Southern Steel. So they have very different views of life.
The play depicts the Japanese submarine attack on Newcastle in June 1942.
It obviously has more direct appeal for older people who probably lived through that time or have heard about that time, have much more direct experience. But lots of students in Hunter High Schools are studying history and studying aspects of local history.
Southern Steel will run for a month at the Playhouse. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
In one form or another, violence is something we all see daily. But as was obvious at last night's meeting of the Victims of Crime Assistance League at West Leagues Club, those who experience it firsthand are left with deep emotional scars. Tracy Lee Gilbert's mother, Dawn, formed Hunter Vocal after her daughter's murder in order to give mutual support to other victims of crime. The meeting attracted 200 people, including Bev Balding. She's collected more than 7,000 signatures to push for the return of the death sentence since her daughter Janine was murdered by street kids at a Sydney train station 3 years ago. Dawn Gilbert says that considering gun laws is such a hot political issue, the parliamentarians' failure to attend the meeting was disappointing. Mrs. Gilbert's criticism of the bureaucracy has been supported by the Wall's End family of Strathfield massacre victim Rochelle Milburn. Mother Janice revealed that only 4 days after her daughter's funeral, she received a Department of Social Security notice terminating Rochelle's child endowment payments of $20 a fortnight. Mrs. Milburn says she's appalled at the bureaucracy's insensitivity and bad timing.
I knew it had to be stopped, but why couldn't they write one letter out to say that how sorry they were, and if we needed any help off them, do it that way, and then write another letter to tell me that it was to be cancelled.
The Milburns are waiting, but not with high hopes, for an apology.
I don't know whether they will or not, but I think we should.
The hostel will be part of the Hawkins Masonic village, already home to 270 aged people. The complex's 4 wings will accommodate at least 40 people, each wing containing 10 apartments, separated by a living area and service block. Various levels of personal and medical care will be available to residents, but they'll remain largely self-reliant.
Well, we're looking at the same level of care we give in our current hostel, where people can, as I said, retain their independence, but they're at a stage in life where they need just a little bit extra care, a bit of extra help to get through daily living tasks.
Already $200,000 has been spent preparing the site. The federal government has provided $1.3 million for the project, but the balance has come from the Freemasons Benevolent Fund. Construction is expected to start within a few weeks and end this time next year.
The 1.5-tonne dome represents the crowning glory of the Sacred Heart Church and the completion of a $185,000 restoration job. The bell tower was twisted in a corkscrew motion during the quake. Its concrete dome fell from its mountings and punctured the brick walls of the tower. Falling rubble crashed through the roof of the church. The new dome is built on a steel frame with cut-down bricks bonded to its exterior and topped with a copper cap. The tower has been pinned to the ground with deeper concrete footings and high tensile rods binding the structure from top to toe. A bronze copper cross was finally lifted to the almost heavenly heights above the tower to complete the job. A steel skeleton has sprung up over a floor the size of a football field as work on the $10 million complex continues on schedule. Workers are preparing to fix roofing panels over layers of insulation material. The building must comply with strict soundproofing requirements, with noise leakage cut to an absolute minimum. It's hoped the centre will be Newcastle's drawcard for large rock concerts and indoor sporting fixtures, such as basketball and tennis. Retractable seating will be installed, which can be concertinaed to maximise the floor area. Overhead battens have been installed to carry banks of lights, while the power supply will be channelled through the floor. The project should be completed by Christmas, with an opening date early in the new year.
The children of Argenton School adopted the Irene Booth Park. It's a recreational area near a busy roundabout at Glendale, named in memory of a former state treasurer's wife. The digging, weeding and rubbish collection was repeated in other Lake City parks by preschoolers, primary and high school students. The Argenton children are conscious of the need for a better environment, both on the land and in the air, because their school is close to the Pasminco smelter. Health authorities are concerned about the high levels of lead in blood and soil counts in the Bullaroo area. A jingle composed by the Argenton children to promote a healthier environment won the school $1,000. The council adopted this idea from the United States and Canada, where the scheme has been a major success. The Reserve Army continues with the clean-up tomorrow, rounding up about 600 car bodies, and the highways and streets in the city should be much cleaner by Sunday night with the collection of roadside litter. The image of the gagged citizen is what the council hopes will encourage first-timers to cast their vote on the 14th of this month. It will begin to appear on television, radio and in newspapers after tomorrow.
The Newcastle City Council elected body governs the city and they represent the community, and therefore people should have a say on who they want to govern the city for the next 4 years.
Newcastle City residents do not have a good record for turning up on polling day. There was only a 75% turnout in the 1986 election. With this campaign, the council hopes to boost the number to between 95 and 100%. As well as voting for aldermanic positions and the Lord Mayor, voters will be asked if they support a return to the ward system.
Voters will be required to vote either yes or no.
In each election, the council decides whether to penalise those who don't vote. This time, a $50 fine will be imposed.
It seemed the prayers of the faithful had gone unanswered, and rather than gathering in worship, this congregation had come together in protest.
Catholicism is all about parish and being together and family, but unfortunately that's not happening in Cessnock.
First under the auctioneer's hammer, the century-old St Patrick's at Nulkabar, but not before Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrick made the terms of the sale clear.
So there is a total ban on these buildings. No alterations will be done to them. No demolitions will be done to them.
After a moment of prayer, the auction began with a sarcastic offer of 30 pieces of silver. Bidding closed below the reserve at $115,000. A quick conference finalised the sale to a local plant nursery for $150,000. But even as the papers were being signed, a counter-offer was being prepared by a syndicate comprising the Sylvester Bakeries family. A family member said the syndicate is attempting to buy the church back for the community. Cessnock Parish priest Father Ryan said the sales were necessary to fund parish operations centred at St Joseph's in Cessnock, but angry parishioners see it as an unholy and greedy grab.
The sale of the church is a real kick in the teeth for the parishioners as a whole.
The 150-year-old St Michael's at Wollombi ranks among the oldest churches in Australia. In this case, the parishioners' prayers were answered. The Sylvester family met the reserve of $120,000, and churchgoers say they'll form a fund to repay the family and keep the church in community hands. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News. Forces were deployed in bushland behind the Gateshead football ovals where an insidious enemy lay in wait. The rusting, jagged hulks of abandoned cars proved little challenge to the military might on hand, with only a few well-dug-in pockets offering token resistance. Once rounded up and captured, prisoners were loaded onto trucks to face a final crushing defeat. More than 300 car bodies were disposed of, along with 72 stoves, fridges and washing machines. A bounty was paid for all scrap collected, and a cheque of $4,700 will be presented to Legacy.
The two-bedroom cottage on the Pacific Highway caught on fire shortly before 9:30. Belmont and Swansea units, as well as a breathing apparatus vehicle from Newcastle, raced to the scene, only to find the blaze had already gutted the fibrous structure. The house was unoccupied at the time. The tenant and her 3 sons were in Sydney for the weekend. With 4 rooms destroyed, the family has lost most of its possessions. Fire officers say the cause of the blaze is unknown, but investigations are continuing. And tragedy at Tea Gardens overnight with a fatal car crash in Miles Street. A Toyota Land Cruiser with 3 Rankin Park teenagers rolled on its side and slammed into a power pole near the Tea Gardens Bridge. 2 were trapped for an hour. One passenger, 19-year-old Paul Oliver, died before rescuers could free him. The driver, Troy Harris, also 19, was flown to the John Hunter Hospital by the Westpac Rescue helicopter, suffering serious head and internal injuries. A second passenger, 19-year-old Jeremy Skews, escaped uninjured. With a fanfare, salvo style, the new clinic was shown off to a congregation of about 150. Among them, some of the people who the service is designed for.
The clients here are the homeless youth of our city here and the underprivileged people who are around the town here.
Named in honour of a chiropractor who helped start the service a year ago, the Catherine Amp-Delesi Clinic now has a volunteer medical staff of 18, including dietitians, dentists and even masseurs. Some of the staff were on hand today to explain the benefits of helping the street kids regain their health.
As the physical problems begin to clear, particularly in this setting, then people begin to blossom in so many other ways.
The Lord Mayor, Alderman John McNaughton, officially opened the clinic, but reminded the gathering that the council-owned building has been earmarked for demolition to make way for a wider road. The Lord Mayor's consolation, the demolition day is still unknown.
This race is unique in Australia. Ahead for these riders is a gruelling climb up the Buckets Mountain, a kayak paddle down the Barrington River, followed by an 11-kilometre run, a race designed to test the endurance and skill of any athlete. Taking the lead early was Brendan Merchant of Nowandok. However, just a few kilometres into the race, 28-year-old Brad Maund of Cardiff South made his move. He needed to be the first rider up the Buckets Mountain. Behind him, more than 60 competitors, each tackling the race with their own tactics. Emerging from the mountain, Brad Maund still led the race, but only marginally. The kayak leg would sort the winner from the rest of the pack. And while the dust played havoc with those still on the road, in the water, little rain over the last few weeks made the kayak section extra tough. Coming out of the 11-kilometre kayak stretch, Maund had forged a lead of around 20 minutes, but the unseasonally hot weather made the last 10 kilometres back into town slow. With hundreds of people supporting him, Maund finished the race in 2 hours and 50 minutes.
I've been training for this for months, and I normally compete on bikes now anyway, but I especially trained for this for a few months.
And while Maund was celebrating, the end was still a long way off for some, including his 27-year-old wife Karen. She was the first woman across the line, while a group from Taree won the team's event.
The group of citizens, led by Alderman Don Geddes, made its final demands to Surf Lifesaving Australia Limited patently clear. The company had until 4 this afternoon to return the control and operation of the Hunter's helicopter and other service assets to this region, or Supreme Court action would begin.
Alderman Geddes, did you have any response before the 4 p.m. deadline?
Well, it's now 4:15. It hasn't happened. No response has been received, no phone call, no fax, no communication.
Although the group had considered Supreme Court action before in the 5-week-old dispute, Alderman Geddes says this latest breakdown meant the legal move had to be taken. The public may be asked to dig into its pockets to help pay for the legal battle by contributing to a fighting fund.
I want people to contribute what they consider appropriate to assist us in relation to meeting those expenses.
The group received support for its push for a Hunter-operated service late this afternoon from the Newcastle Trades Hall Council. Secretary Peter Barrick wrote a letter to Alderman Geddes outlining the union's disgust at finding out the service to which they'd contributed was not Hunter-controlled. Mr Barrick wrote in part, Without exception, the unions are expressing the view that they would not have contributed had the circumstances, as we know them, been public knowledge. The group would not indicate when it will launch its latest legal move in the helicopter fight, with Alderman Geddes only saying it will be taken with the greatest haste. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The Dawson name is synonymous with oysters. The family business has been supplying eateries from its Warners Bay processing centre for nearly 10 years. It's not the job everyone would crave. Up to 12 hours at a stretch, 7 days a week. But Brett, Father Malcolm and twin brother Grant between them churn out 600 dozen oysters every day. And technology is not rushing in to help.
I don't think you can ever beat the human element of opening oysters. They've got air guns and so forth, but there's no comparison to the human hand, how quick you can do it.
Mum, Julia, and sister Jane look after the shop up front and even pitch in themselves over the opening benches in the peak summer season. But according to Brett, it's not just speed that makes a good opener, let alone a champion.
It's just a natural ability, you just keep going along, and when the competition does come around, you've got that knack, you know, you can just get stuck into it and hopefully it all comes off in the end.
Brett's bus driver's holiday will take him to Galway, where the World Oyster Championship has been held for 40 years, to be pitted against the best from Europe and the USA. And he knows what he's up against. He once held the title 10 years ago. While he has smoothed his technique in that time, he's been careful not to get to like oysters too much.
You can't beat a natural oyster for taste, but I'd rather cooked oysters like Kilpatrick or Mornay.
Well, it's handy, of course, if you're opening all day, so you won't eat them as you go,
Well, that's right. It makes it pretty good from the father because the profits aren't so, down at the end of the day.
Martin Adnam of Charlestown was one of 189 passengers who boarded Qantas Flight 46 in Christchurch last night after a 2-week skiing holiday in New Zealand. About an hour after takeoff and high above the Tasman Sea, Martin and the other passengers realised something was wrong.
And the plane sort of did a 180-degree turn, and then straight after that all the lights went out, and there was a slight, there was less noise, which I guess was the second engine turning off.
Martin says what intensified the passengers' uncertainty was the lack of information from the cockpit.
Initially, no, it was probably 5 minutes before the captain actually said anything to let us know.
With his video camera, Martin recorded the passengers' reactions when the 767 touched down safely on one engine at Christchurch Airport. After a 45-minute delay at Christchurch and some anxious phone calls to Australia, the passengers were told to reboard. Once on the plane, the Qantas flight attendant explained there had been no mechanical problem. An airline spokesman says the plane had returned only as a precautionary measure after the cockpit indicator suggested a possible engine problem. Scott Bevan, NBN News.